Week 4, Course Design Process. This video is intended to extend and amplify some of the points that are made in Michelle Pacansky-Brock's brief preview of the concept of backward design. I want to present you with a conceptual model for the process of defining and designing an effective course. So as Pacansky-Brock suggests, we begin at the end with the course learning outcomes. In most cases, these course learning outcomes are handed to you. They're handed to you on a sheet of paper that says course learning outcomes. Your department, your institution, your college, your university probably has already defined what they want the learning outcomes to be for the course that you are assigned to teach. Those learning outcomes may come from something like the Council of Writing Program Administrators first year writing outcome statement. They might come from the 4C's OWI, Principles and Effective Practices, as in the case of this course, but you are probably not given a blank sheet of paper. You're probably given a set of course learning outcomes. Those may be fairly broad. They may be fairly specific. You may also be assigned to teach a certain kind of papers. For example, you may be told you have to teach a research paper, you have to teach an argument, you have to teach a rhetorical analysis. So you may be given more than the course learning outcomes. You are usually not starting from a blank sheet of paper when you are designing an online course. There's usually some outcomes and some frameworks that have been handed to you, but that's where you start, is with the end. And what you begin to do to design your course is to say, how am I going to get those students there? How am I going to help them be able to know and do what they need to be able to know and do according to these course learning outcomes? So that's where you do the foundation of thinking of the major assignments. Sometimes these are called assessments. An assignment or an assessment is something that a student does to demonstrate and provide evidence that they are making progress toward those course learning outcomes. So for us in writing, we're usually talking about writing assignments of some kind, right? It might be a research paper, it might be an argumentation, it might be a personal essay, any of a variety of different kinds of text and multimodal genres. But you define what the major projects or assignments are for the course, and you layer those down as the next foundation of your structure. So for our model course here, we have 3. We're going to do 3 major assignments in our first year writing course. Each assignment then has its own learning outcomes. So if for example, we are teaching assignment 3, let's say assignment 3 is a research paper. So some of those learning outcomes might be find sources, evaluate sources, integrate sources and incorporate them effectively into a paper, synthesize readings, all of the various learning outcomes that would be required to complete that assignment. So now we have broken down our assignment learning outcomes into steps for each assignment. From there, we begin to think about how do we help the students progress toward those learning outcomes. So in a sense, it's kind of a modular model, because you have learning outcomes within learning outcomes. So for each assignment, you think about what are the activities and experiences that students are going to do on the way toward that assignment. So let's say for our purposes here, each assignment is going to be a 4-week unit. So what are the students going to be doing for those 4 weeks? Activities and learning experiences could include discussion boards. They could include peer review. They could include writing a draft. They could include writing an outline. Any of the various step-by-step pieces that you want them to do as they build toward that final assignment. That's the activities and experiences are what the students are doing. It's the interactive part of your course, whether that's whatever form that takes. That's the doing part. It's the what the students are doing to demonstrate and to progress through the assignment learning outcomes so that they can successfully complete that assignment itself. And from there, then you think about, well, what do I need to give them for background? Do they need to read some stuff? Do they need to look at their textbook? Do they need to watch some videos? Do they need to go to YouTube? Do they need to have some resources from me? Whatever support that you can provide that will give them the information, the knowledge, and the tools they need to complete those activities. So you see, we have a consistent structure, and what we end up doing then is kind of wrapping up each one of these as a learning unit. So our course has 3 learning units. We're going to say each one is 4 weeks long. So our course is about 12 or 13 weeks long, maybe 14 if you have an introduction week and a conclusion week with a portfolio. But we have a very consistent structure. Each learning unit includes readings and resources, activities and learning experiences, assignment learning outcomes, and then that major assignment at the end. And those are designed to build the students' skills and knowledge and confidence toward the course learning outcomes. And the final thing that we think about the final element of our course design is to think about the overall trajectory, the overall movement through the course. That's represented by this orange arrow. You want there to be a feeling of continuity. So for example, maybe in Learning Unit 1, we start talking about, well, what is rhetoric? And you define ethos and pathos and logos, and we talk about the rhetorical situation, and you give them some basic concepts and terms. In Learning Unit 2, you can assume that they've begun to understand those from Learning Unit 1, so maybe you build on those. Maybe you develop a more sophisticated model of the rhetorical situation. Maybe you talk not just about writing to inform, but writing to persuade. And then maybe in Learning Unit 3, you talk about higher level skills like synthesis and integration of sources and evaluating sources. But you want to develop a kind of through line through the course so that the students see repeating things that repeat from 1 to 2 to 3 as you move through those learning units. That you can call that a learning path, a learning trajectory, a through line, or whatever. But the key concept in that is something that we talk about in our OWI courses at Arkansas Little Rock a lot, and that's the concept of alignment. You want there to be consistent language so that the students see how the work that they're doing at each step of the way aligns with those course learning outcomes at the end. Students really need to know where they're headed and how it helps them to get there. So when we talk about alignment, as we will be practicing in Project 6 this week, that's what we're talking about, is that the language and the terminology and the framework and the structure repeats over and over and over again. And so everything is aligned so that it's really clear. If we're talking about analysis, the word analysis appears a lot. If we're talking about evaluation, the word evaluation appears a lot, so that there is a clear and consistent semantic alignment across each learning unit as you build toward those course learning outcomes. So that's kind of a conceptual model of what course design looks like and what the process looks like. And I will tell you, in all honesty, I have gotten more systematic and more organized with experience and with time. And the reason is simply that there's a lot of different students that learn in a lot of different ways. And so if my course design is confusing, or if my course design is inconsistent, boy howdy, I'm going to be spending an awful lot of time hand-holding with individual students trying to explain and clarify. It's already, what we do as online writing instructors is already pretty hard. So I think being super organized and maybe even a little bit OCD about the way we design our courses is probably a good thing. I think consistency, modularity, and alignment across the design of each unit, each assignment, and each learning outcome, I think you will find that that's a pretty valuable skill to think about, is being a little bit hyper organized about it. There's plenty of room to build in presence and personality and interaction in between, but you really do need, I think, a pretty clear and consistent structure. So that's a conceptual model of the process that I use, and I think that I can recommend it to other people. It has a lot of flexibility in it. Once you kind of lay down that framework, you can riff on that and experiment and innovate and play and be creative all you want. But developing and designing a pretty consistent and pretty coherent, aligned course is very important toward making that experience usable and a happy learning experience for your students. Okay, so that's a little bit of an insight into the course design process. Thanks for listening.